Silent Hill, a horror game franchise that even after 25 years still remains as one of the most influential and disturbing horror games of all time. A game that when players think back to it, they are overcome with scenes of trauma, nightmares, and horrors beyond belief. With the Silent Hill 2 remake right around the corner, I thought it was the perfect time to look back at the entire franchise in detail in hopes of understanding why the game is not only considered a horror classic, but why it's widely considered one of the greatest horror game franchises ever made. This is the entire history of Silent Hill. Despite being released a quarter century ago, the original Silent Hill remains one of the scariest and most unsettling games of all time. Looking back at the PS1 graphics might not seem too scary, but neither do the birds in Hitchcock's classic film. That doesn't diminish the fact that both are pieces of art that can easily make the hair on the back of your neck stand up should you give them the chance. In 1996, the Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo studio created an internal division called Team Silent, whose aim was to develop a game that would be successful in the United States. Unfortunately, that mission statement does not exactly give a clear picture of what the game would be, and with the inexperienced game director Keiichiro Toyama, it didn't seem at first that this project would flourish at all. At one point or another, it seemed like nobody had faith that Team Silent could pull off their mission under Konami's restrictions. But being underestimated is a favorable position because the mid-90s were not exactly the era of billion-dollar game projects. Team Silent was afforded a high level of autonomy. This allowed them to reject the limits that Konami had placed on them and instead go ahead with their very own vision. Instead of the blockbuster plan, Team Silent opted for the more artistic route, foregoing instant sales for a longer tail and a game that would persist for years to come. The result was the story of Harry Mason, your average American man on the search for his lost daughter Cheryl through the monster and cultist-infested town of Silent Hill. Game reviewers of the time gave the game a lot of praise, with a 9 out of 10 from IGN, a 10 out of 10 from PlayStation Magazine, and a 34 out of 40 from Famitsu. Many would compare it to Capcom's Resident Evil series, with GamePro even going so far as to call it a shameless but slick Resident Evil clone. With the games both being survival horror on the PlayStation, you might understand where they're coming from. However, many also saw what made Silent Hill stand out from the rest. Silent Hill's brand of horror forewent the action-packed monster horror that its contemporaries featured, and instead made the player feel helpless. Michael L. House of Allgame described the game as a truly magnificent work of art and a genuinely terrifying experience combined with a unique, gripping story and immersive atmosphere. With the success of Silent Hill, the game would go on to see many sequels and a few adaptations. First among them was play novel Silent Hill. Now I'll be honest here, this is just included in the video because it is so bizarre. They made a visual novel of Silent Hill for the Game Boy Advance. It's all text and has horribly pixelated 90s 3D backgrounds with some decision-making peppered throughout, and the original PlayStation game's puzzle translated to the Game Boy Advance. But it isn't just a retelling of the original story. Once you finish the main story, you can then play as the supporting character Sybil in a second scenario. Oh, but Will Corporation, the developers of play novel Silent Hill, were not done yet. Once you finish Sybil's story, you could pay for an additional third scenario following a young boy named Andy, who you meet like one time in Sybil's scenario. That's right, DLC in 2001 on the Game Boy. Wild. When it came to the sequel, Team Silent were not content to rest on their laurels and simply make a content update for Silent Hill. Instead, they would create a haunting metamorphosis with a new protagonist, a new source of the horror, and a much improved graphics engine from the soon-to-be-released PlayStation 2. For Silent Hill 2, Team Silent opted to replace Harry Mason, the widower who ventured into the town of Silent Hill in search of his missing daughter, with James Sunderland, a widower who goes into the town of Silent Hill to look for his deceased wife. Okay, so James wasn't exactly a revolutionary new protagonist, but that doesn't mean the game wasn't. In the original Silent Hill, the woes experienced by the main character are largely due to cultists and monsters around the town. With Silent Hill 2, Team Silent decided to double down on the psychological horror that made the original so memorable. Instead of unearthing a cultist plot, James would be assaulted by his own psyche. Through James, Team Silent got to explore the complexities of grief, guilt, and the unreliability of memory. Unlike the monstrosities in the first Silent Hill, which were largely grotesque manifestations of a troubled town's history, Silent Hill 2's creatures were designed to be more humanoid and personal to the game's protagonist. While still disturbing in their design, the monsters in the sequel directly reflected James's internal struggles. Pyramid Head's brutal violence mirrored James's self-loathing, while the seductive yet monstrous nurses represent a twisted version of his longing for his deceased wife. Silent Hill 2 was met with positive reviews in similar veins to its predecessor, although some reviewers of the time did not think it lived up to its legacy. In retrospect, some modern-day reviewers consider Silent Hill 2 to be the best game in the series, which does not bode well as we move on to this. Silent Hill 2 had originally faced some criticism and slow sales from Japanese fans, which led Team Silent to start developing Silent Hill 3 as a rail shooter. However, since the game was successful internationally, the rail shooter game was scrapped, thankfully, in favor of a proper sequel after a year of development. Team Silent now had to scramble to create a full sequel with a significantly reduced budget and time frame, and somehow they pulled it off. In less than 9 months, they managed to create Silent Hill 3 pretty much from scratch. This was quite the accomplishment considering Silent Hill 2 had a development time of about 2 full years. Instead of being a disconnected story taking place in the same town, Silent Hill 3 opted to be a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1. Players would take control of Heather Mason, the adoptive daughter of Silent Hill protagonist Harry Mason, who shows up in the good endings of the original game. This also meant that instead of the personal and introspective story that fans might have expected, Silent Hill 3 instead returned to cultists and monsters and external threats. Another shift that the third installment saw was a bigger focus on combat. While combat had existed in the previous installment, it had been clunky and the worst part of the game. In 3, it served a much larger role, with Heather being able to arm herself with a selection of melee weapons and firearms. It was met with mixed reactions from the critics. Some praised the change for adding variety and intensity to the gameplay loop, but others felt it slightly detracted from the psychological horror focus that defined Silent Hill 2. Despite the differences in approach, most critics agreed that Silent Hill 3 offered a worthy successor to the franchise. The return to the oppressive atmosphere, disturbing imagery, and Akira Yamaoka's haunting soundtrack ensured a truly chilling experience. Developed almost simultaneously to Silent Hill 3, Silent Hill 4 wasn't even supposed to be a mainline Silent Hill game. While it was supposed to be connected to the series, the original intent was for the game to take the series in a completely different direction, using the very simple working title, Room 302. For whatever reason, Room 302 was turned into the fourth mainline Silent Hill game and would feature a lot of series firsts. The idea behind the game was to take your room, which both in real life and in video games is generally the safest place you've got available, and turn it into a wonderful world of nightmares and horrors beyond belief. To this end, the game doesn't take place within the foggy town of Silent Hill. Instead, the primary location is an apartment in the city of Ashfield, which the protagonist Henry Townshend finds himself locked inside. Additionally, whenever you are in the apartment, the game is in first-person perspective to give the player a sense of claustrophobia. Silent Hill 4 received mixed to good reviews upon release. Some praised its innovative approach to the setting and the disturbing atmosphere within the apartment, while others criticized the repetitive nature of the otherworld segments and the occasional technical hiccups. However, the game's unique story and focus on the protagonist's psyche have garnered a cult following over time, solidifying its place as an interesting experiment within the Silent Hill franchise. This would be the last game Team Silent ever made. Supposedly, Konami disbanded the team when they decided that the series should be developed by Western developers. Whether this is true or not, it would make sense seeing as how Silent Hill was created in the first place to appeal to Westerners. In 2006, to coincide with the release of the film adaptation of Silent Hill, Konami developed and released a mobile game in Japan simply called Silent Hill. And when I say mobile game, I'm talking about flip phones, old school. The iPhone wouldn't come out for another year. Much like Play Novel, this mobile game was a visual novel style game, but this time you would be able to move around the game world in a point and click fashion. Unlike Play Novel, in this version, the player would be able to obtain all of the different endings from the original game, including the one when Harry gets abducted by aliens. And then there was an arcade game, because, of course, arcades are still quite popular in Japan, more so than in the West, and Konami has historically been a big name in that space. However, a light gun rail shooter in a loud arcade does not sound like the right fit for the psychological horror series, and it wasn't. Okay, so 3 years and 2 nothing burgers later, we finally got a new mainline Silent Hill game. Except instead of releasing on the new PlayStation 3, Silent Hill Origins was released on the PlayStation Portable. Home console fans could rejoice though, as a few months later, the game would get a port to the PlayStation 2? Hang on a second. Development of Silent Hill Origins was handled by the Los Angeles-based division of Climax Action. The name will make sense in a minute. It was anything but smooth sailing for Climax Action. The game was originally announced in May 2006 with a preview that saw the series going in much more of an action combat direction than it had previously ever been known for, even replicating the camera angle from the recent successful Resident Evil 4. Citing issues with the game's engine and a confused high-level vision for the game, Climax ended up shutting down the entire LA studio and transferring over development to the UK. What the team in the UK got was an action-packed dark comedy inspired by the television series Scrubs. I'm not kidding. A big departure from inspirations like Jacob's Ladder, Crime and Punishment, David Lynch, and Stephen King, which had inspired previous installments. The game was delayed by a full year while the UK team reworked the game into a tighter, more focused game that will provide fans with the experience they want, a Silent Hill experience. Like the name suggests, this game is a prequel to the first one, setting up the events that lead to the opening prologue of Silent Hill. Players take on the role of Travis Grady, a long-haul trucker who stumbles upon the nightmarish town while delivering a package. Drawn in by a young girl he rescues from a burning house, Travis finds himself entangled in Silent Hill's twisted history. The changes made by the UK team were met with positive reception from games journalists in previews, and internet denizens seemed to agree when a beta version of the game was leaked online. Thousands of people downloaded the early broken version of the game, and sentiment was actually overall very positive. Climax CEO Carl Jeffrey denied Climax being the source of the leak, stating, "All I can say is that the code did not leak from Climax, 100% guaranteed. And we have developed over 100 titles in 20 years in business and have never had a leak or theft from inside the company." At this point, another mobile game shouldn't be a surprise. What may be is that this time, mobile phone gamers would get a completely original story in the form of Silent Hill Orphan, or Silent Hill Mobile as it was known in Europe, not to be confused with Silent Hill the mobile game. Taking place at an orphanage within Silent Hill, the series featured multiple new protagonists who were controlled through a first-person point-and-click type control scheme. Since Silent Hill Orphan was made in Java for Java Micro Edition, the game was available for a wider range of phones than the previous mobile game. As long as your phone supported Java, which was pretty common at the time, it would likely be able to play the game. The first game in the series was pretty well rated, garnering an 8 from mobile gaming website Pocket Gamer UK. It is an excellent atmospheric and involving adventure that'll give you the chill in a way quite unlike anything we've seen on mobile in a long time. Two sequels were made, the first by Game Federation Studio, who also developed Orphan, and the second by Playsoft. They were not received as well as the first one, but all three games were considered proper Silent Hill experiences on a mobile phone, which should be considered a feat in and of itself. But Orphan would not be alone in the mobile game space. 2007 saw the release of Silent Hill: The Escape, first for the Japanese exclusive FOMA and later for iOS. The game, which was developed internally at Konami, was a first-person shooter dungeon crawler, in which the nondescript main character wakes up in a creepy hospital and has to traverse 10 stages to escape. The game featured gyroscopic controls which allowed the player to aim the main weapon, but you could also avoid combat and sneak around by listening to radio static or watching the danger icon on the screen. The game received mixed reviews, with critics praising the environment and atmosphere, but the gameplay is cited as pretty clunky and very easy. Finally, after 4 long years, the daddy of psychological horror has a new mainline entry for home consoles, and this time for the 7th generation consoles, Silent Hill: Homecoming. This time we were in the hands of the newly merged studio Double Helix Games, and they had a lot to go on for inspiration. Not only were the games fairly varied at this point, but 2006 had also seen the release of the Silent Hill movie adaptation, which we're not going to talk about because it sucks. So it might come as a surprise that the movie served as a pretty significant inspiration for this game, of course. This can be seen perhaps most obviously in the transition from regular Silent Hill to the other world, the monster dimension, which the protagonists of the series continuously go in and out of. The transition is nearly identical to the one seen in the movie. The story follows Alex Shepard, a soldier returning home to Shepherd's Glen after receiving news of his brother's disappearance. Upon arrival, Alex finds the town eerily deserted and shrouded in a thick fog. As he searches for his brother, he stumbles upon a nightmarish alternate reality. Unlike prior console entries that emphasized atmosphere and exploration, Homecoming leaned more towards action-oriented gameplay. Alex, a trained soldier, utilizes various weapons and combat maneuvers to fight off the grotesque creatures that lurk in the shadows. While puzzles remained, they were less central to the experience overall. Silent Hill: Homecoming received mixed reviews. Some praised the return to a console format and the fast-paced combat system. However, others criticized the departure from the series' core strengths, psychological horror, and a focus on atmosphere. The shift in lore and the lack of connection to the established mythos also disappointed fans who craved a return to the Silent Hill that they knew. While Homecoming wasn't a critical darling, it offered a glimpse into an alternate direction for the franchise. Its emphasis on action and its focus on a more personal narrative hinted at a potential evolution for Silent Hill, though one that didn't resonate universally with the fanbase. Alright, it's the late 2000s, which means that a remake was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. This time, on the Wii, and for some reason the PlayStation 2 in 2010. Climax Studios was back with another non-sequel. Some might say that Shattered Memories was a bold new take on the series by reimagining and expanding the original game, but we know that Will Corporation did that first all the way back with play novel Silent Hill. Like in the 1999 original, the narrative follows Harry Mason again, a man searching for his missing daughter Cheryl in the now snowy town of Silent Hill. However, unlike the original, the story unfolds through a unique mechanic, Harry's psyche meter. Throughout the game, players encounter various choices and events that directly impact Harry's mental state. These choices range from responding to psychological evaluations to reacting to hallucinations, which influence the very fabric of Silent Hill and the monsters that Harry encounters. Shattered Memories fully embraced the Wii's capabilities. The game utilized the Wiimote for various actions, from examining objects to solving motion-controlled puzzles. The flashlight function on the Wiimote became a crucial tool for navigating the darkness and uncovering clues, and it was pretty cool. Unlike Origins and Homecoming, Shattered Memories emphasized evasion and escape sequences. When confronted by monstrous creatures, players had to strategically navigate the environment or solve puzzles under pressure to avoid capture. This focus on non-violent solutions added a unique tension to the gameplay. Silent Hill Shattered Memories received generally positive reviews. Critics praised the innovative use of the Wii's capabilities, the psychological elements woven into the gameplay, and the fresh perspective on a familiar story. However, some criticized the lack of traditional combat and the drastic changes made to the narrative compared to the original Silent Hill. Despite these mixed reactions, Shattered Memories stands as a testament to the versatility of the Silent Hill franchise. Its willingness to experiment with storytelling, gameplay mechanics, and a unique reimagining of the series' lore earned it the reputation as a fascinating entry within the Silent Hill universe. Silent Hill featured fog. Shattered Memories was themed around snow, so it only makes sense that 2012 Silent Hill Downpour would continue the trend of inclement weather. Czech developer Vatra Games took the helm for Silent Hill Downpour, a return to the series' core elements with a fresh twist. Downpour wasn't just a rehash of past successes, it injected the innovation while staying true to the franchise's signature brand of psychological horror. The story centers on Murphy Pendleton, a convicted murderer on a prison transfer who finds himself inexplicably stranded in the foggy town of Silent Hill after a mysterious car crash. Trapped in this nightmarish landscape, Murphy must confront not only the grotesque creatures that lurk in the other world, but also the demons of his own troubled past. Downpour heavily relies on environmental storytelling. Players uncover Murphy's troubled past and the secrets of Silent Hill by exploring dilapidated buildings, piecing together hidden documents, and interacting with the few remaining inhabitants who haven't succumbed to the town's darkness. This approach fosters a more personal and introspective experience, much like Silent Hill 2, the best game of the franchise. A unique feature of Downpour is its ever-changing environment. The weather system dynamically alters the atmosphere, with heavy rain and fog amplifying the oppressive mood. Additionally, the town itself subtly shifts throughout the game, with previously blocked paths opening up and new areas becoming accessible. This constant sense of change and discovery keeps players engaged and on edge. Downpour even incorporates a morality system. Throughout the game, players face choices that impact Murphy's moral compass, influencing the narrative and ultimately leading to one of several possible endings. This branching narrative structure encourages replayability and adds a depth to the experience, allowing players to shape Murphy's fate and witness the consequences of his actions. Silent Hill Downpour received mixed reviews. While some praised the return to traditional Silent Hill elements and the innovative environmental storytelling, others criticized the clunky combat system and the occasional technical hiccup. However, Downpour's commitment to psychological horror and its unique approach to character and narrative earned it a dedicated following among fans who appreciated its willingness to experiment while staying true to the series' core identity. In 2012, Konami also released the Silent Hill HD Collection, a remaster of Silent Hill 2 and 3 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, developed by American Hijinks Studios. While intended to introduce these genre-defining titles to a new generation, the collection received mixed reviews. Some praised the ability to revisit these classics on modern consoles, while others criticized technical issues like missing textures and altered sound effects that impacted the atmosphere. Some also criticized the naming, as the so-called collection only included 2 games, and if you've been keeping track, you'll know that we're on nearly entry 15 now. Despite these shortcomings, the Silent Hill HD Collection remained a valuable entry point for those curious to experience the psychological horror masterpieces that are Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. The franchise is no stranger to portable gaming, with multiple entries on mobile phones, Game Boy, and PSP at this point. So it should come as no surprise that when PlayStation released a new handheld console, Konami would be ready to scare gamers. Well, they would try at least. Released in 2012 for the PlayStation Vita, Silent Hill Book of Memories marked a significant departure from the series' core formula. Developed by WayForward Technologies, Book of Memories wasn't a traditional survival horror experience. Instead, it embraced a dungeon-crawling RPG style with a unique twist. Players could create their own protagonists and delve into a mysterious book containing their entire life story. By altering these memories, they can rewrite their past and face the consequences of their choices. However, this seemingly innocent act would unlock a nightmarish world inspired by these distorted memories, blurring the lines between reality and warped perception. The idea behind the game was to address one of the criticisms of Silent Hill Origins, while also feeding into one of the push points that Sony was making on the PS Vita. A game which could easily be picked up and played for short bursts of time on, say, public transport. The game also had online cooperative multiplayer. Up to 4 players could team up to explore the procedurally generated dungeons, battling grotesque creatures, and solving puzzles together. This focus on cooperative gameplay added a new social layer to the Silent Hill experience. Silent Hill Book of Memories received mixed reviews. While some praised the innovative concept and fast-paced dungeon crawling gameplay, others felt it strayed too far from the series' established themes of psychological horror and atmospheric exploration. The cartoony visuals and lighter tone also alienated some fans who craved the more mature and unsettling experience of previous entries. By 2014, the Silent Hill series was on shaky ground. It had been quite a while since a really solid Silent Hill game had been released, and fans of the series were asking not only for something new, but for something good. At Gamescom 2014, Konami announced that they were going to release a playable teaser for a new horror game titled simply PT from a brand new studio called 7780s Studio. It seemed to be a pretty simple teaser. The main character wakes up, walks through a fairly decrepit hallway, at the end of which is a door. Once the main character walks through the door, they find themselves at the beginning of the hallway once again. As you continue walking through the very eerie, dimly lit hallway, things would change. Creepy messages would play on the radio, and monstrous entities would begin to appear. At the end, the apparition of a woman would kill you unless you figured out the puzzle. It was absolutely terrifying and absolutely incredible. By 2014, the internet was a very different place than all the way back in the earlier days of Silent Hill. Not only was gaming much bigger than it had been 15 years prior when Silent Hill came out, but the way people interacted with games had changed. PT blew up on YouTube, with Let's Plays, analysis, and theories garnering millions upon millions of views. PT wasn't just a game demo, it was a viral phenomenon. Despite the game having some insanely difficult puzzles to find the true ending,
Jareth.
That shit did not just work.
in less than 24 hours, the internet sleuths had figured out that it was all a farce. 7780s Studios was a fake name, and PT is actually a new Silent Hill game from Metal Gear Solid's legendary creator Hideo Kojima and legendary director Guillermo del Toro, and it starred Norman Reedus. Absolutely insane. Unsurprisingly, with the massive virality of the playable teaser and the names of Kojima, del Toro, and Reedus attached, hype for Silent Hills was off the charts. Gamers who had never heard of the franchise before were excited to, at the very least, watch what was expected to be one of the greatest horror games of all time. Which means the news of its heartbreaking cancellation hit really hard. In March 2015, it was reported that Kojima and other senior staff were leaving Konami after the completion of Metal Gear Solid 5. This caused people to question the state of Silent Hills, and in late April 2015, Del Toro, then Reedus, and finally Konami announced that Silent Hills had been canceled. And gamers wept, including myself. The last trace of PT was on PlayStation 4s, which had not connected to the internet since the demo's removal from the PlayStation Store. Consoles with the demo on them were selling for over $1,000 a piece, and I believe are selling for even more today. Even though Silent Hills never ended up releasing, the small demo had a lasting effect on the games industry. In a move that few saw coming, the game series, which was once called a Resident Evil clone, would even be copied by Resident Evil. In 2016, Capcom would release a playable teaser for the upcoming Resident Evil 7 titled Beginning Hour. Like PT, it was a first-person puzzle game set in a dilapidated house with puzzles and multiple secret endings added over the course of a few updates. Though it never got released properly, PT remains dear to many horror fans' hearts. 10 years had passed since PT was released, with the only pieces of Silent Hill coming out being slot machines and DLC for other games. Nothing for horror game fans to sink their teeth into. Then, like a ray of sunshine through the fog, Konami announced and released Silent Hill: The Short Message in early 2024. Developed by Konami Digital Entertainment and Hexadrive, Silent Hill: The Short Message arrived as a free download for the PlayStation 5. This bite-sized horror experience aimed to deliver a modern take on the series' signature psychological horror elements. Players take on the role of Anita, who receives a disturbing message from her friend Maya, urging her to find it within a crumbling apartment building notorious for rumors of suicides. Drawn into this unsettling location, Anita must navigate the increasingly warped reality and confront the mysteries it holds. Silent Hill: The Short Message takes after the earlier entries in the series and prioritizes atmosphere and exploration over elaborate combat. Anita navigates the deteriorating apartment complex, encountering bizarre creatures and distorted environments that reflect her growing unease. Much like the core of the series, the narrative of The Short Message leans heavily on symbolism and environmental storytelling, leaving much to player interpretation. Themes of social media's impact, bullying, and the psychological effects of isolation take center stage here. Reviews for Silent Hill: The Short Message were mixed. Some praised its visuals and unsettling atmosphere and exploration of contemporary themes. The free price point was also a positive factor. However, others criticized the short playtime, limited gameplay mechanics beyond exploration and puzzle solving, and some repetitive chase sequences. While The Short Message may not have been the return to Silent Hill that fans may have hoped for, it ended a decade-long streak of gray clouds over the series, unless you're very much into slot machines. Additionally, in 2022, during the Silent Hill Transmission presentation, Konami announced 3 games, an interactive animated series, and the third movie in the Silent Hill movie series. Polish developer Bloober Team, creators of the psychological horror series Layers of Fear and The Medium, are working on a remake of Silent Hill 2, with a release date of 2024, which, based on the trailers we've seen so far, looks really spectacular. Konami also announced Silent Hill Downpour, which will be the first title in the series that was not published by Konami. A collaboration between studio No Code and publisher Annapurna Interactive, Silent Hill Downpour looks like it might be the return to the thematics of Downpour, judging by the focus of waves shown in the teaser trailer. While little to no information about this game has been released as of yet, there have been hints that we'll learn more about it in 2024. And last but not least, Silent Hill F. Like Downpour, we know only a little bit of information about this title. What we do know is that it will be the first mainline Silent Hill game since 2012's Silent Hill Downpour. It's being developed by Neobards Entertainment and is a departure from the series staples. It will not take place in the American town of Silent Hill. Instead, F will transport players to 1960s rural Japan. The theories around the reasoning behind changing the setting are varied, ranging from a completely unrelated news story based in Japanese folklore to seeing the origin of the cult at the center of Silent Hill's problems. Only time will tell which theories are true and which are lost in the fog. Overall, the Silent Hill franchise has had plenty of ups and downs throughout its 25-year history, but with these recent announcements from Konami, the future is looking very bright. I hope you enjoyed the first entry in my brand new documentary series that focuses on the history of gaming franchises. I'll be putting out 1 to 2 of these a month, so make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch future videos, like the video, and leave a comment. Your support is free and helps me out a ton. Thanks for watching, everybody.